So I wasn't sure if I was going to say anything about preaching not from a script today, so thank you, Robin, for this was a commitment that I made to myself when I started my internship, that at least once I was going to preach without reading. And I understand from my colleagues that it can go one of two ways. It can be incredibly beautiful and inspiring, or it can go totally and completely off the rails. So I'm hoping for something somewhere in the middle of those two today. Please, won't you pray with me? May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in me and around me, now and always. Amen. And I do have 4 pages of notes and bullet points, so I will be looking down. Whenever I prepare for a sermon, the past couple of years, it's a multi-day process for me. I have to read the reading or the scriptures, I have to think about it, I have to try to figure out what the message is and how I need to organize my thoughts and organize what I feel like I need to say. When I read today's reading from Acts, there's a verse in there that stopped me dead in my tracks. I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscription, "To an unknown God." I was absolutely floored by that. An altar to an unknown God. Now, Paul was a pretty smart guy. He was bright, he was articulate, he was exuberant, and most of all, he was a brilliant evangelist. He had the ability to know his audience and tailor his message to exactly who he was speaking to, and then, boom, lay out his message to them in a very kind way. The people of Athens were also very smart. They were very educated. They were very philosophical. There was a lot of wealth in that community. And more than anything, they really tried to cover all of their God bases. They wanted to make sure, they had a suspicion that there was this thing called God, and they wanted to make sure that they, just in case, that they had God covered. And that's exactly what Paul was speaking to the group in Athens today. And so it makes me wonder, if Paul was to show up here today, to stand at this lectern, if Paul was to go through our cities and towns, I wonder what altars he would find us worshiping at today in our culture. Maybe money. Money makes the world go round. The currency of our democracy is money. For goodness sakes, written on our currency is "In God We Trust." I saw a funny sign recently in a small little mom and pop convenience store, and it was written on a piece of cardboard in magic marker, and it said, "In God We Trust. Everyone else pays cash." And I thought that was very humorous. So perhaps Paul would see our altar of money, perhaps power over, power to control, power to frighten people. Perhaps Paul would see us worshiping at the altar of our achievements and our accomplishments, our education, the initials after our name, MD, APRN, PhD, on and on and on. And sometimes these initials become the very core of our being, and in some ways become self-serving and self-worshiping. Perhaps he would see us worshiping at the altar of human beauty. You don't have to look very far. Open a magazine, turn the TV on, go online, and it becomes very evident how much we as a society value human beauty. So thinking about it, most of us are not really that different than the people of Athens 2,000 years ago. We all worship at the altar of the unknown God. Paul like I said, understood his audience, and that was part of his brilliance. And like I said, that's exactly what he did while speaking to these people of Athens. He laid out the message very, very clearly about who this God was. He goes on to say, the God who made the world and everything in it does not live in shrines made by human hands. God created humans so that they would search for God and perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far from each one of us. He is not far from each one of us. For the very large part of my adult life, I searched and searched and searched for this elusive, squirrely, unknown God. I was a church hopper. I would go to this church because, oh my gosh, the sanctuary was so beautiful and they have Tiffany stained glass windows, and surely God is there. Well, maybe not there. This church over here has a beautiful music program. I'm sure I'll find God there. No. Well, this church has spectacular worship. I know I'm going to find God there. To no avail. In his late life, my dad had an amazing, astounding relationship with his personal God, a relationship that I certainly admired and maybe even was a little bit jealous about. Here is this very blue-collar, not very educated man, did not have a lot of money, did not have power, yet he got something that I didn't. And I remember one particular conversation I had with him, and we were talking about sin. Now, understanding my dad was a cradle Catholic. He, from birth to death, he was a Roman Catholic, and that was it for him. As a matter of fact, he would often call me a heathen. But we were talking about sin, and I was pontificating about the different types of sins, and there's mortal sins, and there's venial sins, and there's this kind of sins, and that kind of sins. And my dad said to me, Mark, there is only one sin. When we choose not to love, that's sin. If you can live your life through that, if you can remember that, you will know your God. And I thought, all of my education, all of my seminary training, all of my reading, all of my theologies, everything that I had ever learned, I had never heard such beauty and simplicity as that. When we choose not to love, we separate ourselves from God. So there's a lot of talk about love here at First Church in Sterling. And I remember when I first started here, kind of scratching my head and thinking, what's all this love talk? What is this all about? As I've said many times before, my decision to come here to First Church and do my internship was very, very intentional. Part of that was because of my previous relationship in another life with Robin. Part of it was my sort of wanting to know what small church in America looked like. Part of it was my fascination of UUA and UCC Church Federation and what that looked like. But the biggest part for me, I think, was to finally, once and for all, look at this monkey on my back that I had been carrying around my whole life, and that is Christianity. What does that look like in the modern world? I had run away for so many years, run away from the church, run away from God, and really felt like this gave me the opportunity to truly and authentically look at that. And what I discovered here was to be still, to listen, and know that I am. When we call our neighbors or we make a meal for a shut-in or say a kind word to a stranger, there God is. When we covenant ourselves in community, when we are together in church and working for the church, there God is. When we break bread around a table, when we expose our true, authentic self with each other, where everyone is welcome, there God is. When 60 or 100 cars line up, go through the town, circle the church to pay homage to the medical professionals on the front line, there God is. I have experienced here the God of so many faces and colors and deeds and words. Truly, truly, truly a God of love. Robin, you pushed me, sometimes shoved me, you cajoled me, you encouraged me. Most of all, you helped me discover my call, and I will be eternally grateful to you for that. Megan, if you're watching, you kind, sweet, gentle, gentle soul, thank you for your kind words. Thank you for being there for me. And thank you most of all for helping me understand that my Unitarian Universalist faith is completely compatible with Christianity, and I will cherish that forever. And all of you, dear people out there, you lifted me up, you supported me, you encouraged me, you egged me on, you loved me up. St. Augustine writes about God, "You have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." You, dear people, will be always where my heart rests. My heart will rest in your kindness. My heart will rest in your faith. My heart will always rest in your love. And because of you, my heart will rest in God. So I say farewell, knowing that I've been blessed, knowing that God has graced me by knowing all of you, and hoping that our paths will someday cross again. In that very well-known old Irish blessing, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hands. Thank you, dear people, for allowing me this opportunity, and thank you for loving me. Amen.